Good morning, I'm Atlas Morgan. We're starting with breaking news. Israeli forces have struck the Assembly of Experts building in the holy city of Qum. That is the body responsible for choosing Iran's next supreme leader. According to Israeli defense sources, the 88-member clerical council had gathered to vote on Khamenei's successor when the building was hit. Reuters reports the structure was flattened. If confirmed, Israel just bombed the institution that was trying to reconstitute Iran's government. That's not just a military strike, that's a message. We have 7 stories this morning starting there. Let's go. 4 days ago, the United States and Israel launched the most significant joint military operation in the Middle East in decades. The code names tell the story. America calls it Operation Epic Fury. Israel calls it Operation Roaring Lion, and in 4 days the campaign has reshaped the region. Here's where we are. CENTCOM reports over 1,250 targets struck in the first 48 hours alone. Iranian command and control centers, IRGC headquarters, air defense systems, ballistic missile sites, and drone launch facilities all hit. The Iranian Navy has effectively ceased to exist. All Iranian ships in the Gulf of Oman have been destroyed, according to CENTCOM, including frigates, submarines, and the IRINS Makran, Iran's largest naval vessel. B-1 Lancers launched from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota conducted long-range bombing runs. The USS Gerald Ford is operating from the eastern Mediterranean. Now the cost. The Iranian Red Crescent reports 787 dead inside Iran. Independent groups put the number higher, though verification is difficult amid internet disruptions. 49 senior regime leaders have been killed, including the big one, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, age 86, confirmed dead on March 1st. His wife, daughter, son-in-law, and grandson were also killed. The IRGC Commander-in-Chief, the Defense Minister, the Chief of Staff, the head of the Defense Council. An entire generation of Iranian military leadership gone. Iran has not taken this lying down. The IRGC claims it struck 27 U.S. bases across the Middle East, targeting facilities in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. 11 Israelis are dead from retaliatory missile strikes. In Kuwait, 6 American soldiers were killed at a tactical operations center at Shuaibah port. A one-way attack drone penetrated air defenses. Defense Secretary Hegseth described it as one projectile that made it through. Reports indicate there was no warning, no siren. 18 more service members are seriously wounded. President Trump projected 4 to 5 weeks for the campaign, adding the military has the capability to go far longer. He described progress as substantially ahead of schedule. Secretary of State Rubio was more direct. We have objectives. We will do this as long as it takes. On Capitol Hill, War Powers resolutions are scheduled for midweek. Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Rand Paul are pushing in the Senate, Representative Thomas Massie and Representative Ro Khanna in the House. The votes are widely expected to fall short of the 2/3 majority needed to override a veto. Congress is having the debate. The military operation continues regardless. Inside Iran, a 3-person interim council has taken over. President Pezeshkian, the judiciary chief, and a cleric named Alireza Arafi, who most analysts see as the leading candidate for permanent supreme leader. Some Iranians celebrated Khamenei's death in the streets. Others gathered in mourning. The regime declared 40 days of mourning. And then this morning, the Qum strike. The Assembly of Experts, the 88-member body of senior clerics constitutionally responsible for choosing the next supreme leader, had convened in Qum to begin that process. Israel's Air Force hit the building. Iran's Tasnim news agency, which is IRGC affiliated, confirmed the strike and said the building was almost completely destroyed. An Israeli defense source confirmed the operation. Casualty numbers among the clerics are unconfirmed, but the implications are clear. First they killed the supreme leader, now they've struck the body tasked with replacing him. Iran's chain of succession just got hit twice. The military campaign is one thing, the economic shockwave is another. The IRGC has declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. They threaten to set ablaze any vessel that attempts passage. 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through that waterway. Nearly 70% of those shipments go to Asia. 30% of Europe's jet fuel transits the same corridor. And they're not bluffing. At least 3 oil tankers have been struck, including the Skylight, hit 5 nautical miles north of Qasab, Oman. The crew evacuated, 4 injured. Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd have suspended all transits. Traffic through the strait is down 80%. 150 ships are stranded. Oil jumped from $73 a barrel on Friday to above $79 on Monday. Analysts are forecasting triple digits if the disruption persists. Insurance premiums hit 6-year highs. Rerouting around Africa's Cape of Good Hope adds weeks to delivery times and thousands of dollars per shipment. European shares hit 1-month lows. Eurozone inflation is climbing. The economic shockwave is real and it's moving fast. Gulf state air defenses have been working overtime. Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia have collectively intercepted hundreds of Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. Qatar alone shot down 90 missiles and 2 Iranian fighter jets. But some got through. 35 drones hit inside the UAE, damaging areas near the Burj Al Arab. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh took 2 drone hits. These are America's partners absorbing blows meant for American interests. They're holding the line. The conflict is spreading geographically. Case in point, Cyprus. For the first time since 1986, the British Royal Air Force Base at Akrotiri in Cyprus came under attack. A Shahd-type drone, the same kind Iran has been shipping to Russia for use in Ukraine, struck the base on March 2nd. Damage was minor. A second drone was intercepted, but the message was clear: nowhere is out of range. This matters because the UK agreed to allow US forces to use British bases for operations against Iran. That decision, which Prime Minister Keir Starmer initially resisted over international law concerns, made British sovereign bases a target. France is now deploying anti-drone defense systems to Cyprus. NATO allies are adapting in real time. The conflict that started in Iran's missile sites and nuclear facilities has reached the eastern Mediterranean. Every day the theater gets wider. All right, different kind of story, still involves the military. OpenAI rushed to finalize a Pentagon contract last Friday and then immediately had to walk it back. CEO Sam Altman admitted the company shouldn't have rushed. His words: "It just looked opportunistic and sloppy." The original contract lacked explicit protections against using AI systems for domestic surveillance of American citizens. After backlash from employees, competitors, and the public, the revised deal now includes Fourth Amendment protections and bars intelligence agencies like the NSA and DIA from using OpenAI's tools without a separate contract modification. Here's the context that matters. Anthropic, OpenAI's main competitor, had pushed for similar safeguards in their own Pentagon negotiations. When the Pentagon wouldn't agree, Anthropic walked away. OpenAI took the deal anyway, got called out, and is now adding the protections Anthropic wanted all along. AI in the military is coming. That's not a question. The question is whether the guardrails get built before or after something goes wrong. OpenAI chose after, then corrected course. Credit where it's due for fixing it, but the process exposed how fast the AI-military relationship is moving and how little infrastructure exists to govern it. Back to Washington. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem is in the hot seat today. She's testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the questions are coming from both sides. The Department of Homeland Security has been in a partial shutdown for nearly 3 weeks. TSA employees are working without pay. FEMA staff face disruptions. But here's the thing: ICE and CBP personnel are still getting their paychecks, funded through separate legislation. The enforcement continues even while the rest of the department runs on fumes. The hearing will focus on Operation Metro Surge, the massive immigration enforcement deployment in Minneapolis. St. Paul, DHS deployed up to 3,000 federal officers in what they called the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. The operation has generated lawsuits from Minnesota's Attorney General and the ACLU. The situation is complicated by the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens during enforcement operations. The facts of each incident are contested, and that's what the senators want answers on. Notably, Noem isn't just catching fire from Democrats. Republican Senators Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski have both called for her resignation. Tillis said she made the president look bad with, quote, amateurish thought processes. The president responded by calling both senators losers. DHS claims 675,000 deportations in the first year. Interior enforcement is up nearly 5-fold. Whether you think that's necessary enforcement or overreach probably depends on where you stand. The facts are, the operation is massive, the shutdown is ongoing, and the secretary is testifying under fire from her own party. Meanwhile, there's another war that hasn't ended just because a new one started. The Russia-Ukraine war turned 4 last week, and in a conflict defined by grinding attrition, February brought a notable shift. Ukrainian forces captured more territory than Russia did during the month. Commander-in-Chief Siersky reported gains of approximately 400 square kilometers. President Zelensky cited 300 square kilometers recaptured in southern Ukraine specifically. Russia currently occupies about 20% of Ukrainian territory, but the advance rate tells the real story, 15 to 70 meters per day. Over 3 years, Moscow has seized roughly 1.5% additional territory at a cost approaching 1.2 million casualties, more than any major power in any war since World War II. Diplomatic channels are active. Bilateral talks between the U.S. and Ukraine concluded in Geneva. The White House has set a June 2026 deadline for comprehensive peace negotiations. The UN General Assembly voted 107-12 for a ceasefire resolution. The United States abstained, citing concern that some language might distract from negotiations. Here's an ironic twist. Ukraine's expertise in countering Iranian drones, the same shods that Russia has used by the tens of thousands against Ukrainian cities, is now being deployed to help Gulf nations defend against those same drones. Britain announced that Ukrainian experts will help shoot them down over Gulf states. The student has become the teacher. European allies increased military aid 67% above the 2022-2024 average to compensate for reduced U.S. allocations. The EU committed €90 billion for 2026-2027. Ukraine's own defense budget allocated $16.5 billion for procurement. The war grinds on, overshadowed but not forgotten. Last story, the money. South Korea's KOSPI index plunged 7.24% on Monday. The worst single-day drop in 19 months. They're calling it Black Tuesday. The numbers are staggering. $270 billion in market value wiped out in a single session. Samsung Electronics fell nearly 10%, dropping below the symbolic 200,001 threshold it had just crossed last week. SK Hynix, the memory chip maker, dropped 11.5%. Hyundai Motor down nearly 12%. Kia, same. A sell-side circuit breaker triggered for the 3rd time this year. Why Korea? South Korea imports virtually all of its oil. When the Strait of Hormuz closes, Korea's export-dependent economy takes an outsized hit. Foreign investors dumped 5.1 trillion won in a single day. Retail investors bought the dip, purchasing 5.8 trillion won. But here's the other side. Defense stocks surged. Hanwha Aerospace jumped 15% to a 52-week high. Korea Aerospace Industries gained 3%. War is terrible for most of the economy. It's very good for the companies that make the weapons. Also worth noting, Samsung's $44 billion chip fab in Taylor, Texas just saw its mass production timeline slip to 2027. That's the 4th delay. Geopolitics and chip fabrication delays all hitting the same stock on the same day. For comparison, while the KOSPI fell 7%, the S&P 500 was basically flat. American markets absorbed the shock. Asian markets did not. That tells you something about where the structural resilience lives. 7 stories, 1 thread. The world is rearranging itself in real time. A regime that has sponsored terror for 4 decades is losing its leadership and its navy simultaneously. The economic system that depends on a narrow strait in the Persian Gulf is discovering what happens when that strait goes dark. And markets from Seoul to Frankfurt are pricing in a reality that Washington is still writing. 6 American soldiers died in Kuwait this week defending American interests abroad. That's the fuller picture. I'm Atlas Morgan. Atlas holds the world. Morgan broadcasts it.